WTF, Why Training Fails by Jason Forrest. Read by me, Jason Forrest. All right, listeners, let me tell you how I've set up the audio recording of this book. First, I'm going to read each of the 10 chapters. And then after each chapter is read, I'm going to have Mary Marshall, the president of FPG, who's also an amazing thought leader and keynote speaker, discuss each chapter in more depth. This is going to give you, the listener, a fuller, deeper dive on the concepts that we've been told people really want to know. Hope you enjoy. Intro. $164.2 billion is spent annually on training, yet 70% of the training fails to produce a positive ROI. This book explains why. The definition of training is to change behavior. See, when I started FPG 10 years ago, it was the vision that we would unleash human performance by redefining training, transforming cultures, and changing lives. Look, I knew I needed to redefine training because every training company I'd been involved with or knew of only taught knowledge without successfully changing the underlying behavior. I knew it was going to take culture shifts to make this possible, and that when done successfully, people's lives would change. They would have a growth mindset and more belief in themselves, which would lead to higher profitability for their companies. I've learned it's not just knowledge that changes behavior and performance. Last year, I trademarked my performance formula. Performance equals knowledge minus leashes. Performance represents our results. Knowledge is the process, pattern, and strategy necessary for success. Leashes, meanwhile, are the limiting beliefs prohibiting us from acting on our knowledge. This book is a compilation of experiences I've had working as an executive coach and trainer for companies across the world. Some of these experiences go all the way back to when I was a sales manager. I'm so proud of these stories. These stories are from a period of learning and growing. My goal through this book is to illuminate the most commonly encountered pitfalls during team training, which will allow you to sidestep them before they ever arrive. I love hearing feedback from my books and would love for you to share your experiences with me. You can email me at jason.forrest@fpg.com. I always respond. Sincerely, Jason.
Jason, you said that there's over $164 billion spent annually on training, but 70% of it is failing. So how is it still existing as an industry?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's not. Right now, what happens is a lot of people think that training is a luxury. It's not something they need to do. It's something that they get to do when they have extra money. When I actually started my training company 10 years ago in 2008, it was the worst recession that we've had in a long time. And I would go door to door and I would call on companies and I would say, hey, I want to be a training provider for you. And they would say, we don't have money for that. Right now our company is going under and the last thing we need to do is spend money on training. And it was at that moment I realized something pretty cool, and that is that training by definition is actually to change behavior. And so if people are investing in training that doesn't actually change behavior, therefore to change results, then of course they wouldn't spend money on it. It's a luxury, not a necessity. And so at that moment, I made this commitment in 2008. I remember like it was yesterday. And that was to be the first training provider that actually can change behavior, which I know is kind of a crazy thing to think about, to actually say we are a training provider that changes behavior. But that's not really the case. See, most training providers that are really out there, they're nothing more than a person who comes out and kind of lectures to the audience or gives them some ideas, tells them kind of what to do or talks down to them and kind of loves and then loves them and leaves them. But that's not what really training is. Again, training is to change behavior. And so training, we must tell people what to do, the process, pattern, strategy, and we must tell people why they need to do it, why, to improve their life, to improve their productivity, to improve their performance. But we also must give them the steps. We must tell them how to specifically do it. And one of the things I've learned with a lot of training companies out there is they're either what-based training providers, they tell people what to do, or they're more on the motivational kind of speaker side, which is they have some life-changing story where, sales changed their life and changed their family. They came from, maybe a tough family situation. And so they've got this story that they believe everyone needs to hear because it changed them. And so it's going to change everyone else. And so they get everyone fired up with their why, and it's all about the why. and everyone gets fired up. People are crying, they're cheering, they're ranting. And then of course they leave the training seminar and they kind of think about it on their way back to the office, and they go, now how in the world do I do what that speaker just told me to do? And so we really believe in being a multi-dimensional training company, not just the what-based training company, not just the why-based training company, but a how-based training company. We believe that true lasting change happens by giving people the steps. People need to know how to do something. And once they understand how to do something, that gives them the certainty to actually execute that new behavior.
See, I love that you just said that, because yesterday I was sitting at a luncheon at a seminar, and the whole table, the conversation was about all of the articles that they had read from experts. And every article didn't tell anybody how to do what it was telling them to do. It was telling them there's more business out there to get. It was telling them that they have underperforming people on their team that they could get more profitability out of, but they didn't tell them how to do any of it. And so they were having a very jovial, fun conversation about how worthless most articles from experts are.
Well, and I get it, Mary, because I mean, look, we've all had bad examples of probably consultants or training in the past, and again, our job is we want to really bring back the nobility to training, and in order to do that, we got to do it right. I mean, people have heard the cliche before that those who can't do teach, those who can't teach consult, those who can't consult train, those who can't train are great keynote speakers, and those who can't speak write articles. And those who can't write articles are probably life coaches that they paid $39 for a certification on Udemy, and they coach people out of their bedroom.
In their pajamas.
In their pajamas, of course. They got to be in their pajamas.
And fluffy slippers. Who doesn't want some life coaching from somebody in fluffy slippers?
Yeah, but seriously, the reason for that, Mary, is because of course they don't know how to do something. They don't even know how to get their own life in order. And so, again, they're just kind of talking at people because they've never actually experienced true success for themselves. So they can't actually break down how to be successful because they've never did it. They never experienced it.
Well, it sounds like the first question when interviewing any type of consultant or trainer is, have they actually done it, and have they done it in difficult circumstances? Because you're right, how many executive coaches have never been an executive? How many sales trainers have never been a salesperson in a down market?
Well, I mean, to your point, we got hired. FPG was hired by a $4 billion company recently, one of many companies we work for, and it was interesting. The head of sales said one of the things he loved about us was we actually had a physical address. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he said, "It's amazing how many sales training companies out there actually have a PO box." And I was like, "Well." He said the reason why they have a PO box is because they don't actually have a physical company. And so why would a $4 billion company hire a company that doesn't even have a physical address? They're not even a real company.
So Jason, something I thought was really interesting that you said earlier was that most companies see training as a luxury. Do you believe that because they're seeing it as a luxury and not a necessity is why there's low accountability on making sure that the training company provides that ROI?
I do. Because if they believed that the training was there as a strategy in order to achieve the company results, well, then of course they would be bought in. Of course they would be all in. It would be something that we 100% believed in. I mean, put it this way. I mean, right now, if any parents are listening to this and you paid for extra tutoring, well, would you hold your kids accountable for the extra tutoring? Of course you would. Why? Because you believe it's a beneficial strategy for your kids to get better grades in school. And just the same, we got to look at training like that. If you believe that training is a strategy to increase the bottom line, then of course we've got to support it from the company perspective.
Okay, so let's say right now I am a VP of sales for a company. I'm hiring a sales training company. What are things and metrics that I can put in place right now to make sure that I am using the company's money responsibly and that I am getting that return? How much time do I need to look at, and what do I need to be measuring and looking at to make sure that we are getting that return on investment quickly?
Well, the first thing you'd want to look at is just people's buy-in. And when I mean specifically people, I mean the top 20% of the sales force, the top 20%. At FPG, we had to make a decision pretty early on in our company history, and that is, who are we going to go after? Are we going to be a sales training company that goes after the gen pop, that goes after the general population, or the bottom producers and organizations? Or are we going to be the sales training company that really writes material that's in line with what the top 20% sales warriors are already doing or not doing all the time, that pushes them to the next level? And so we decided to go with the minority, which is the top 20%. Now, this has been a problem for us in some cases because we get some pushback from the bottom 20% because it's out of their comfort zone. It's tough. But here's the problem is that think about right now how many training providers you've brought in that the general population agrees with and says, I totally agree with this stuff. Why? Because it's exactly what they're already doing. But the top 20%, they roll their eyes and are like, I don't have to do this, right? Like, this is completely the opposite of how I would actually sell. So I would say step one is look who's agreeing with the content. Is it your top 20% agreeing with it, or is it the general population? Then I would say step two is you want to immediately start seeing, do people actually do it? So are people immediately executing the ideas? Do they immediately say, hey, this was easy. I agree with this. And this is something that I executed, and this is the success that it brought me. Did it move the sale forward? Maybe at first it doesn't actually make a new sale, but at first it actually made progress on moving sales forward. And then, of course, step three, and that is that you start seeing an ROI. You start seeing sales come in. People will actually say, hey, I did this technique and it helped me make a sale. And so I would say those are the three simple steps that you'd want to look at right out of the gate to measure the effectiveness of your new sales training endeavor.
So Jason, I want to talk a little bit about the performance formula that you created. The performance equals knowledge minus leashes. So the knowledge piece, I think, is very easy to understand. Everybody knows that there's a lot of knowledge, whatever industry they're in, that they need to know in order to be successful at their job. But it's the leashes part that gets a little bit confusing. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, the leashes are any kind of resistance that keeps us from executing what we know. Again, the knowledge is that process, pattern, and strategy that we've been told to do in a certain seminar, but the leashes are anything that keeps us from doing it. So let me just throw out a simple concept. So let's say that we teach your sales team to ask every single customer, what is holding you back from choosing us today? What's holding you back from going forward with us versus XYZ competitor? So that's the knowledge. It's a pretty simple question to ask, and we know the benefits of that. Immediately, they're going to tell us, obviously, what's holding them back, and then we can handle those objections and close again. The question is, what stops salespeople from asking that question 100% of the time? Well, that's the leashes. And there's several types of leashes. I actually think there are 4 types of leashes that would keep a person from asking that question 100% of the time. The first type of leash is a belief leash, meaning that they have some sort of limiting belief that says they're not worthy of asking for that question. A lot of it has to do with their own kind of dollar sign they have in their head. I believe every person wakes up every morning and says, this is what I'm financially worth. I'm worth $60,000 or $80,000 or $200,000, and they'll use whatever technique we give them to the level they believe is possible based upon their kind of self-worth or their identity. The second leash that holds people back from asking that one simple question could be a reluctance. A reluctance in the form of, I don't want to come across too pushy, or a reluctance in the form of, it sounds too salesy to ask it that way, it's not my language style, or a reluctance in, I'm selling to my friends and family, or I'm selling to someone older, or in this situation, I'm selling to the C-suite, and they have to be sold a different way. These are all forms of reluctances that would just situationally keep a person from asking that one simple question of what's holding you back. The third type of leash would be a story. Now, we all have these stories in our life. That's what life's all about. But some of those stories can really hold us back. So, for example, a story would be, I'm telling myself a story that when a customer is smiling, they're buying, and when they're frowning, they're not buying. And so because of that, the person in front of me is frowning, and so there's no way in a million years I'm going to ask that question of what's holding you back, because you got some grumpy face, and we all know that if they're grumpy, they're not buying. And the fourth type of leash are rules. Rules are the if this, then that type of things, meaning that If all decision makers are present, then of course I'm going to ask that question. If I've demonstrated or showed all of my product, then of course I'm going to ask that question. If I've already handled all of the obvious objections, then of course I'm going to ask that question. If all the absentee buyers are of course present, then of course I'm going to ask that question. If they've already seen all of my competition, then of course I'm going to ask that question. If they've been pre-qualified ahead of time, then of course I'm going to ask that question. So you can see this goes on for a long time, and rules are a big thing. I can spend a lot of time really talking about rules, but I do believe the quality of our life is equal to the amount of rules that we have. And so whenever we can let go of rules, let go of that resistance, then of course we'll have a more freeing life. So again, those are the 4 types of leashes that would keep a person from just asking that one simple question of what's holding you back from choosing us today. See, one of the things I believe, Mary, and this is so critical, and this is what separates FPG from really everyone else, and that is it's selling is really simple. It's just not easy. And the reason why is because the psychology gets in the way. It's the leashes that get in the way. And so as a training provider, as a coach, not only do you want to give people leash-free knowledge, but you also want to spend a lot of the time, the majority of the time, removing the resistance, removing the leashes that are holding them back from earning what they're truly worth.
I love when you're talking about the difference in prospects that are smiling versus grumpy face. I hear all the time from sales professionals that they just want to sell. They're really good at selling if they're in front of the person because they can look at their face, where they don't want to sell and they don't want to ask the question and the closing questions over the phone because they can't see the person. And so my workaround that I thought was so funny and changed everything for me, since all of my sales have mostly been over the phone in my career, is when I'm on the phone with somebody, I just picture them smiling and nodding at me the whole time. If they're in front of me, then they have the option to frown. But if I'm on the phone, I can picture them any way they want. So I like that. And then I also love the game now of saying, you know what, the grumpiest person here is my best prospect, and just the change in mindset that has when you walk into an event and go, I'm going to find the grumpiest person here, and I'm going to talk to them, and I'm going to sell that person. They're my prospect. It changes everything. And now, you're right, we can now act on the knowledge that we have, and those leashes don't hold you back from your performance. Well,
it's funny you say that, because I remember a coaching session that I was having with a sales professional one time, and he was the first one that told me this, that I read some book, Jason, one time that said that if they're smiling, they're buying. And I said, well, that's the craziest thing. What is that all about? And he said, well, of course, if they're happy, that they're buying. I said, well, but how do you know that they're not happy? They just physically don't have the capability of smiling. And I said, let's kind of change the way we look at that. I said, is it possible that there are people in the world that actually are really happy? They make a lot of money. They're definitely a qualified buyer for you, but they just aren't smiling. And he said, I don't know, maybe. I said, think about it this way. I said, name one CEO, name one executive that you've ever walked into and actually seen them smiling at first. You can't name it, can you? And the reason why is because as they go up the food chain, as they go up the ladder of success, I believe the higher they go up, the more the gravitational pull just pulls their face down until they have what's called grumpy face. And so, it's really the lower level employees that are young and new, that have no stress in their life. They're the ones that are smiling. It's actually the ones that have all the decisions and have all the pressure of life to make the right decision. They're just always in their head. They're always thinking. So of course they're going to be frowning. It was interesting. That one thing, Mary, completely changed his career. And at that moment, he said, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Now, I actually think the opposite. Now, if they're smiling, I kind of look at him and go, you probably can't afford me. But if they're grumpy, he said, man, that's it. That's my A prospect. And majority of the time, that's right.
Well, and you're right, because the top CEOs, they don't even smile when they're getting their picture taken.
They don't.
So pick up an Entrepreneur magazine, an Inc. magazine. There's not a single smile in the whole thing. It's the grumpiest magazine that's out there.
Even name one president. Right now, Google all the past presidents of the United States, and you'll never find a picture of them actually smiling, but they're the most powerful person on the planet, the most qualified buyer you can actually sell to.
So Jason, what's the real why behind writing this book?
It's a great question, Mary. Look, my real why is because, again, I want to bring back the nobility and the pride and the respect to professional training. And in order to do that, I got to be a radical. And what's interesting is a lot of people, they call me a radical, but radical actually means to go back to the root of something. And so the root definition of training is to change behavior. So going forward, I want us all to commit to only investing in training providers that have a track record in actually changing behavior. Would you get on the operating table with a doctor who only went to a 2-day seminar to learn how to perform your procedure? Of course not. Chapter 1. Experiential learning, the process of learning through experience. The definition of experiential learning, which is really the only way to truly learn anything, is the process of learning through experience. Look, it's a fact. It takes up to 15 years of education and training to become a doctor. But in some companies, all it takes is a degree and a 2-day training seminar to manage a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Let me share with you a real-world training failure. A sales trainer taught a simple process to a sales team during a workshop titled The 6 Steps to Handling Objections. The sales team wrote it down, but it ended there. There was no follow-up process to the training, so the sales team never put the more effective strategy into place. Instead, the sales team slumped back into their previous programming and less than ideal conversion rate. So why do we send our employees to a 2-day seminar on converting more leads or becoming a more effective leader, only to later back off and throw them to the wolves? Training programs must extend beyond the classroom and reach into their daily lives. So here are the 4 steps to experiential learning. Step 1, learn it. To learn something, you got to acquire the necessary knowledge, skills, and abilities. Seminars aren't wrong. They're just not useful as standalone events. See, be sure to keep the training workshops and seminars, take copious notes, and ask questions with a thorough understanding of the subject material. Step 2, apply it. This is where you exercise your new knowledge in chunks. See, it's unreasonable to overhaul a process completely overnight and expect long-term success. So you must break up the concepts earmarked for mastery and tackle each one in turn. Learning in chunks will assure you truly absorb new content and processes and then act on them. Step 3. Reflect on it. Stop, think, and reflect on new teachings. After practicing new techniques, step back and reflect. Did they lead more to success than the previous plan? If not, then seek out coaching to determine where the gap in your knowledge base lies. Step 4, get coached. The coaching along the way is the key to guaranteeing your success. I can't say this enough. I can't stress this enough that the coaching along the way is the key to guaranteeing your success. So don't be afraid to hold trainers accountable to the process they teach. If something isn't working, ask them. Ask them to give you more insight or work with you on streamlining the process's personal effectiveness. One of my core beliefs is that frustration plus confusion is on the edge of a breakthrough. And so every time you sense your emotional state being frustrated or be confused, act on it and make sure you ask and demand for that coaching. So next time, you want to assist your team in mastering the new techniques by having them practice one new concept at a time. Make sure you follow up with them and spend time in the field, game time coaching them. Remember, it's all about experiential learning.
Jason, here in chapter 1, you talk about a sales manager whose team sat in a seminar and then they didn't carry it through afterwards. So for the sales managers out there that do have seminars for their team, what's a great process, pattern, or strategy that they can do and use internally to keep that momentum up after the seminar is closed?
Mary, the best thing they can do is take that training and break it down into bite-sized chunks. In life, we get way overwhelmed. Whenever anyone's been overwhelmed, you ever been overwhelmed in your life, Mary?
Maybe once.
Maybe once. Well, the reason why you, of course, are overwhelmed or anyone's overwhelmed is because they overgeneralize. They make something kind of bigger than it is. And so whenever someone goes to a training session, they look at all this content and they go, this is a lot to memorize, this is a lot to handle. And so what we need to do is need to break it down into bite-sized chunks. You break it down into something that a person can actually handle. And so what I'm a big fan of is saying, okay, let's take that and everyone commit right now to breaking this up into sessions, or maybe it's an all-day seminar and break it up into 20 different individual pieces. And everyone commits to, hey, let's take those individual chunks and say, hey, for this first week, we're going to do the first chunk. And then for the second week, the second chunk. And we're going to break it up into little pieces. Well, the reason why that's huge is because people can learn something faster when they really break it up like that into little small pieces, because it gives them an easy objective to go after. And once they actually tackle and have success with that smaller chunk, well, that gives them courage and momentum to go after the next chunk and the next chunk and so forth. And so by doing that, that's the best way to really kind of learn or master anything. There's an old learning adage that it takes 21 to 28 days to make or break a habit. It takes 90 days to change behavior. And I think it ends up taking about a year to really change the beliefs of a culture, because you need more than the majority of the people to really be on board with what we're teaching or what you're teaching to have this kind of critical mass effect. And then it ends up kind of changing the cultural norms of the organization.
Great. Okay, so my team has just sat through a seminar, and I have a list of different objectives and new ideas I want them to try. So should I do those on a weekly basis, chunk them down to weekly accomplishments, the 28 days that you talked about, 90 days? What's the right rollout for my team?
It's a great question. I think that would be a lot of the actual subject matter that's being taught. So you as a leader need to figure out, based on the level of your people, are they kind of new people, are they intermediate, are they advanced people, and the concepts that are being taught, are they things that they've been taught before but they're not consistently doing them, or are they things they've never heard before and so this is brand new? If there are things that they've never heard before, then of course you want to take those concepts and you want to go longer on them. You would probably want to take each concept and maybe practice it for a week. And then make sure people can learn the idea and then demonstrate the idea, and then of course have success by talking about how they use it in the real world. The best way to really measure the effectiveness of anything is are people using it in the real world? And so, Mary, I would just say this, that once every person says, I tried it in the real world with an actual prospect, and here's the success that it brought me, well, right then you've created this anchor. You've anchored them to, when I try this new technique, it brings me more success. And so because of that, they're going to now use it on their own more often. It's before that where we just kind of intellectually talk about the concept, or maybe we role play the concept, that it's more unlikely that they're actually going to execute it in the real world. It's just when they have real life success that increases their paycheck that, of course, they're going to say, wow, I do this more often, I'm going to make more money. So why would I not continue to do it?
I love that. And I know that a lot of sales leaders, they believe what you believe about this. They believe in training. They believe in chunking it down and having this continuous training for their team. But logistically, they get stuck because they're looking at a situation going, you know what, I'm going to my owners saying, hey, you know what, I need to take my entire sales team off the floor for 2 days. And then after that, I'm going to take them off the sales floor for another hour a week in training. So how do they justify that? Could they expect that they're going to get less sales because there's less time selling?
Quite the opposite, actually. Chick-fil-A is open 6 days a week, where their competitors are open 7 days a week. But of course, they're the most profitable franchise out there. Just the same, any professional sports team only actually performs 1 day a week. But of course, they're practicing for that day the rest of the week. And so even at FPG, we believe in training all of our trainers 8 hours a week. So for basically 1 full day a week, they're in training so that they can be the best versions themselves for the other 4 days that they're actually working with our clients, which is nuts. It's unheard of in our industry to do that. And so we have found through our success of being the fastest growing sales management training company in the United States for the last 3 years in a row, is that we're actually taking our trainers out of the office 1 day a week just for training, and we're outperforming all of our competitors that aren't training at that level. And so there's plenty of examples of that, but the biggest thing to remember is that salespeople are athletes, and they must be coached and trained like athletes. They're not like your normal employee. I mean, every day a salesperson wakes up and kisses their family goodbye and puts on their clothes and gets in that car and goes goes to the battlefield, and they've got to be mentally tough. They got to be mentally strong. They got to have a sales warrior mindset in order to handle this. Selling is, I believe, the toughest of the performance arts. It's like a cage fight. See, sales fails so much more often than every other department, like accounting or finance or operations. In every other department, they win more times than they lose, versus in sales, they lose more time than they win. So sales has to be mentally tough. They have to have the mindset of a sales warrior. They have to go out every single day to that battlefield, and they have to be mentally strong, mentally fit. And so, of course, we want to coach them. We want to train them at the highest possible level so that we can decrease that failure rate, so that we can increase that conversion rate, so that we can increase your company's profitable sales.
Here's a question to think about. Why do people still buy roadies when it's illegal to drink and drive? Chapter 2. In Texas, we call an alcoholic beverage consumed while driving a roadie. You might call it something else, like an adult soda or a road pop, but in Texas, us Texans call it a roadie. Isn't it interesting that when you're waiting in the checkout line at the gas station, you'll see several ice bins full of single tall cans of beer? We all know that drinking and driving is illegal, so how can gas stations get away with selling single cans of beer that we all know majority of people are not going to wait to start drinking at home? Why do people still drink and drive when the threat of jail hangs overhead? The answer is simple. 5 words. Culture is always in control. Let me share with you a real-world training failure. During an FPG training seminar, a sales professional asked her trainer how to sell a home without a fireplace when her competition included them. After the trainer explained how to sell the house without lowering the home price or throwing in the fireplace, a sales manager rose at the back of the room. The sales manager's response resounded through the room. "If you need a fireplace to sell the house, I'm going to throw in the fireplace." The group of 50 sales professionals cheered. The reason the manager threw in the fireplace, which elicited cheers, and I do mean cheers, from the gathered sales professionals, is the same reason people still drink and drive. The culture determines acceptability, not the law. You see, the FPG trainer presented the room with a better way forward, but the room's reluctance to leave what they knew outweighed their need to adopt a better strategy. So here are the 2 steps to change your company's culture. Number 1, make it socially acceptable to do the right thing. And number 2, make it socially unacceptable to do the wrong thing. So next time, set the standard for what is socially acceptable, live the standard, and accept nothing less. Only then will your team be able to get on board with your new strategies.
All right, Jason, in chapter 2, you tell a story about a sales manager who is approving giving away free fireplaces in order to make a sale. And I think we can all agree that we don't want to do that. It erodes the profit margin. It's not good for business. But sometimes our business realities are we need sales right now. It's the last week of the month. It's the last week of the quarter. We've got to get out of this jam. We have too much inventory on hand. And in those situations, training takes time. And we need to give things away. What does somebody do when they're stuck and they're feeling the fear of that situation?
I think they have to make a really strong judgment call. They have to realize that we're playing the long game versus the short game. I love this quote by Warren Buffett that be greedy when others are fearful and be fearful when others are greedy. And right now, again, are we going to take the kind of the gen pop way of doing things, which is when the going gets tough and the market is tough and we're not making our sales numbers, then of course we're going to lower the price and then it's just going to be a race to the price bottom. At the same time, what kind of message are you sending to your salespeople? I mean, the message you're sending to them is that I don't believe in you. I mean, just think about that right now. Every single time that you say yes to lowering the price that a salesperson asks for, you're saying to them, yeah, no problem. I believe that there's no way in the world that you're capable of selling that product or service at the actual advertised price. Yeah, I believe that. And so because of that, I'm going to make your life easier and I'm going to lower the price for you because I don't believe you're capable of doing that. That's actually the subconscious message that we're sending. I mean, just the same. I mean, think how often we stand up on chairs as sales managers and we think we're doing the team such a favor and we say, hey team, I got an announcement for you. We got this great promotion right now for the month of July and everyone right now gets, if they buy, they get blank percentage off. What are you really saying? Again, you're standing up on the chair saying, hey team, I just want you guys to know I 100% don't believe that you're capable in selling. I don't believe you're worth it. I don't believe you're enough. And so because of that, we're going to lower the price because you're not capable of selling it at full price. And so because of that, we're going to give you a better price, a lower price. If any of you were capable, of course I wouldn't do this, but I know you're all not capable. So here you go. Here's a lower price.
So I love that you started this chapter talking about roadies, which is alcoholic beverages that you drink while driving. And there's clearly a segment of the population that believes that this is socially acceptable. Just like I've heard you talk about people flashing their lights at each other when they're speeding to let you know that there's a cop coming up. And it's socially acceptable to speed, so we do it. So I'm interested, what are the roadies and what is the flashing of lights that we can look for within our businesses as a litmus test or a culture check for what's happening within our own companies?
Wow, that's a great thought-provoking question, Mary. Here would be one. I mean, you ever worked for an organization before where the red alert goes out, the memo goes out, the text message goes out, the phone chain goes out and says the CEO is driving around, the CEO is coming to each and every single store, or the sales manager is out and about. What are they doing? They're flashing the lights because that culture is always in control, which is nuts, right? I mean, why would the CEO be out and about? Well, they're just making sure the standards are being met. But what is that also saying? It's also saying that right now, the standards are not being met with the CEO not there. And see, I believe that culture is nothing more than what happens behind the boss's back. And so, look, we all have a culture, Mary. The question is do you like it or not like it? And here's the simple way if you believe your culture is effective or not effective. And that is, if people are doing the exact same thing that you would want them to do when you are not supervising them, that's the culture that you want. If they're doing the opposite or not the same things that you would want them to do when you're not there, then that's the culture you don't want. And that's one example. Another example would be just as simple as people, not coming to work on time. Just think about the disrespect of not coming to work on time. I mean, basically, when they first came on board in the job, they of course interviewed and they were there on time. But then every day thereafter, they just for some reason have bad traffic that day. I mean, good traffic is only on the day of the interview, and then after the day of the interview, all of a sudden bad traffic prevails. Well, that's because they just don't want to work for the organization the same way that they did on the day of the interview. So I think we need to own that as a company. We need to up our standards, and we need to create a place where people want to come to work versus have to come to work. But that would be another sign that I would look for to say that, your culture is in control when everyone's got some sort of traffic delay for the next meeting that you're a part of.
So there are two steps to change your company's culture. It's make it socially acceptable to do the right thing and make it socially unacceptable to do the wrong thing. How do you actually do that? How do you change the social acceptability?
Well, the way that I do it is whenever I start a new training contract, what I do is we have the leadership actually go through and evaluate the social acceptance of every single employee. So let's say you've got 10 employees, you would go through and you would say, okay, is this person adverse to what we're teaching? Is this person in non-acceptance of what we're teaching? Is this person in acceptance of what we're teaching? Is this person in appreciation of what we're teaching? Is this person in admiration of what we're teaching? Or is this person an advocate for what we're teaching? Now, so we go through and we actually ask, what do we think? Where are they on the ranking? And then I get a quick poll, and that is if the majority of the staff of those 10, the majority of them are either at appreciation, admiration, or advocacy, then we know they're socially for what we're teaching. They're socially for the right behaviors and the more profitable, productive behaviors. But if the majority of them are the opposite of that, which they're at adverse, non-acceptance, or acceptance, that means that it's socially acceptable to do the wrong thing, not the right thing. So the next thing we do is we go through and say, okay, who are the ones that are above the line, the ones that are at the level of appreciation or admiration or advocacy. And then we start taking those and we say, okay, let's get the advocate person to be on board with us and getting them to be a social spokesperson and getting them to be supportive of what we're doing vocally, and get that person who's at appreciation level to be an advocate, and then get those people to work on getting the person who's at the appreciation level to be even more and be an advocate or be at the admiration level. And then we get them to band together and go work with the person who's at just an acceptance level to be above the line and be an advocate. And so we kind of keep working one by one from the trenches, from the inside, to really create a coup, but a coup in a good way that gets everyone to be above the line, to be profitable, to be for the right behaviors. That to me is the fastest and the simplest way to get everyone on board. And the greatest thing about it, Mary, too, is you don't have to fire anyone. I mean, again, unlike a lot of the training competitors of ours out there that say, if people aren't on board, you got to fire them. Well, we don't believe that. We believe that they just haven't been given the right expectations and they haven't been held accountable. And so we believe that everyone deserves that chance to be given the right accountability and to be worked with. And what we believe is just you keep raising the standards and believing in people, and people will opt out if they don't want to be a part of a winning organization. But you don't really need to ever fire anyone unless, of course, they're doing something illegal.
And when you say that now there's a culture within the peers of the standard, you also don't have to manage them because they're either managing themselves or they're managing each other at that point as well.
That's exactly right. And it's interesting because one of the most common things I hear from leadership is that they just need more management. They have their ratio. They've got 25 salespeople that report to them, and they just need another manager to supervise the 25. It's just too big of a group. And majority of the time, what I find is that it's actually not really true. Majority of the time is they have so many of their employees that they're supervising that are really below the line, that are really adverse or at non-acceptance or acceptance of the cultural norms of what's really going on, and so they have to babysit all of them. But if they get those same employees to be above the line, to be really for, not against what the leader's trying to do, then they actually probably don't need another manager. They can actually have employees that are really self-sufficient, that can really coach and develop themselves and don't need that babysitting.
Well, and that's so important to the bottom line. So that's changing everything because now you have more profitable employees and you can continue to grow in ways that you want to and not ways that you feel like you have to through managers, babysitting managers.
That's it, 100%.
Let me ask you a question. Would you label your children high maintenance, overpaid prima donnas? Well, of course not. Then why would you call your employees that? Chapter 3. One of my core beliefs is that all people are born knowing they're enough. This is obvious in toddlers who possess an infectious spirit of daring, curiosity, and confidence. Unfortunately, that belief is often eroded by negative reinforcement over time, which asserts that perhaps they're not enough after all. So as a leader, you have powerful influence over your employees. You've heard the expression, words can build us up and words can tear us down. If you describe your team with negative words and thoughts, how can you then expect them to be the best version of themselves for you? Let me share with you a real-world training failure. An FPG trainer asked his audience at a seminar to describe a salesperson using one word. The shouts from the high-level executives in the meeting were telling. They said words like unethical, overpaid, high maintenance, unnecessary evil. After the trainer met with the sales team and asked the same question, they responded with equally harsh words. Dr. Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. See, I believe when you change the way you look at your employees will change. So here's a tip. When hiring any outside sales trainer for your organization, ask them how they describe salespeople. You want to ensure they see the best in them and aren't negatively contributing to the idea that they aren't enough. Here are 3 steps to changing the way you look at your employees. Step 1, remember why they were hired. Make a list of your employees and note why you hired each of them in the first place. What did you see in them? Do they still have those qualities and you simply haven't noticed them? Or have they changed? Step 2, practice gotcha. When you catch your employees doing something right, recognize them both one-on-one and in front of their peers. See, when we point out behaviors that are in alignment with our standards, our employees are more likely to repeat them. And step 3, unleash their performance. Ask them directly what's holding them back from becoming a better version of them. So next time, make sure your thoughts are in alignment with what is great in someone before coaching them. Then use words that will build them up, especially when you're looking to improve their performance or correct their behavior.
So chapter 3, all people are born enough. Jason, my favorite concept from this chapter is remember why they were hired. And so it's looking at an employee and going, why exactly did I hire them to begin with? And so sometimes they're exactly, we're not happy with their performance, and we realize that's on us because they're actually exactly the same as when we hired them. We're just not happy with that. It's not enough for us anymore. And so that happens. But there's also times where we can look at employees and say, they really have changed. They used to show up on time. They used to have a hard work ethic. They used to have follow through and do follow up, and they're not doing that anymore. And so when we have an employee like that, how do we handle that? How do we approach that with the employee?
Great question. What I would do is I would have a coaching session with them, and I would remind that employee on why I hired them. What specifically did I see in them from an attitude perspective, from a belief perspective, from a behavioral perspective? What qualities did I see in them? And then I'm just going to gently remind them and say, look, those are the reasons why I hired you. Now, as of late, here are some specific things that you're doing that are the opposite of why I hired you. And when you came on board with me, we had a contract, and that is I hired you because of those qualities that I saw in you, and I want you to uphold that agreement. Right now, the person that you're acting today, or the behaviors you're acting today, I wouldn't hire that person. And let me ask you, would you hire that person? Majority of the time, Mary, that actually works really, really well, is that you're just reminding them that I'm not asking you to change. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm just asking you to go back to who you were on day one. Who you were on day one was great. And who you're on day one is what I signed up for and what I'm paying for on a daily basis. I just want a person to go back to their roots. I want them to go back to who they are, who they're capable of becoming, and be that person.
Well, I like that because it feels like a more authentic version of themselves anyway. And I don't see anybody out there that couldn't be supportive and get behind just being more of who they already are and being more of the best version of themselves. So I think that's a great way to do it. So Jason, I've worked with a lot of sales managers and talked to a lot of sales, even VPs of sales. And one of the struggles that they have is that the owners of their organization or the C-suite of their organization didn't necessarily come up through sales. And doing that, they might see sales as being a necessary evil. They might see them as just being high maintenance or overpaid. They're not understanding the complexity of the sales department and of the job of sales professionals. So how do those sales executives teach their leadership and their C-suite how to think and behave and treat the sales department and think about the sales department?
Yeah, the first thing you want to do is just kind of change the way you look at things. So, for example, realize that it's not that salespeople are unethical or boring or pushy or manipulative. It's just that some salespeople are boring or pushy or unethical or manipulative. And so first thing we do is just kind of break up, just change the chunk size. So it's not a generalization that all salespeople are like this. It's just some salespeople are like this. But Mary, that's the same with really any profession. I mean, so often people say, I don't like lawyers. Well, no, it's not that we don't like lawyers. It's just we don't like some lawyers. Some lawyers are unethical or do really the wrong things. But again, that's the same way with any profession. Well, and the majority of this belief system really came from the lack of training. If you really think about it, I mean, the career of sales is the number one career profession in the human race, meaning that more people have chosen the profession of sales sometime in their life. They were maybe worked in some sort of retail clothing store when they were a kid, or maybe they sold Cutco knives, or maybe whatever. There was some kind of sales thing they did in their life. At just the same time, it's also the least taught career in universities, and it's also the career that probably most people kind of deny ever having. It's a kind of a plan B career versus a plan A career. And so put all that together with the fact that we don't spend enough time training those people to be helpful and to be ethical and to be honest and to be great advisors for our customers. Well, then of course we're going to now start stereotyping people the wrong way. And so the same executives that will say these people are unethical or overpaid prima donnas are the same reason why those salespeople are like that. And so going forward, if those executives would say, you know what, we're the cause of this problem, but we're also the solution to this problem. And so right now we want our sales professionals to be above the line, to be ethical, to be honest, to be helpful to the customers, then we just need to train them. And if we do that, then we will, of course, have the best sales professionals in the industry.
I think that's so interesting because there's also, I've heard you talk about the difference between what an executive says and what their team hears. Many times I've talked to sales professionals that have done some unethical behaviors, or they have kind of skirted the line of ethics. What they heard from an executive was, make your numbers. Do whatever you have to do to close out the month strong. And that executive did not mean to be unethical, didn't mean to skirt that line. However, that's how it was interpreted. And so you're right. I think that language that an executive uses and making sure that it's interpreted correctly by the employees is so important.
That's right. Yeah, communication is always based on the meaning it elicits versus what is intended by the actual communicator. And so we really, as a communicator, we need to always take responsibility for our communication because, if a salesperson hears that, hey, do whatever it takes to make the number. Well, now that salesperson could hear that as let's go below the line, let's cut corners, let's do some sort of kind of illegal cheating or unethical cheating in that one situation. So we've got to be careful with what we're actually asking our people to do, and we got to be very implicit with our words. So instead, what you would say is, right now, I want everyone to follow the process, pattern, and strategy that we have taught you to make your numbers this month. And I know with 100% certainty that either A, we're going to make our numbers, or B, we can hold our head up high, knowing we've done everything to make sure the score takes care of itself.
All right, here's a question for you. When your kids are preparing for a big test, do you tell them it's going to be hard for them to succeed? Chapter 4. Coaching is like parenting. All right, parents, it's the morning of the day of your child's big test. Do you drown them with fears about the difficulty of the looming exam, or do you build them up and mentally prepare them to have a winning mindset? See, setting your team up to achieve their goals begins with you. If it were your child, you provide an encouraging pep talk. You'd give them the tools and resources they needed to make their goals. Your employees need the same. Let me share with you a real-world training failure. An FPG trainer was listening to a sales manager give a morning huddle to her team before his training seminar began. The sales manager wanted to make sure her team paid close attention to the trainer and took notes. So she addressed her team. Remember, guys, she said, this is holiday time, which is our slow season, so pay attention today so you have a shot at making your quota. This sentiment teed up a defeatist mindset because it rested too much weight on their circumstance and not their ability. Here are 3 ways to set your team up for success. Step 1, pre-frame. Prime your employees to get them in the right mindset to succeed. Remind them why they're capable of making their goals, not why it's going to be difficult. Shift the focus onto who they are and why they're qualified. Step 2, give purpose. Meeting circumstantial challenges is a chance for them to unleash their brilliant minds and step up to the plate. Step 3, make them believe they can succeed. Draw your employees' commitment to the company and fill them with a pervading sense of self-belief. If you're someone right now that's relating to this story, don't worry. Next time, provide your team with the best resources they need to succeed. That includes you being their biggest source of encouragement. And encouragement is literally to give someone else courage. See, if you make people feel big, they'll do big things. If you make people feel big, they'll do big things. If you make them feel small, yeah, you guessed it, they'll do small things.
Chapter 4, coaching is like parenting. Jason, one of the questions I get most often from sales leaders is trying to decide when is the right time to start a sales training program. And what they're looking at is going, hey, Mary, here our spring selling season is this. This is when we're going to be really busy. I don't know if I want to start training when we're really busy, but then after that, our team it's going to fall off and they're not going to be able to make their sales because it's a really slow time for us and the team knows it's slow. And so maybe that's the right time to start training. So I'm wondering from you, one, when is the right time to start training? And then what are your thoughts on those spring selling seasons?
Well, the reason why anyone would ever say, when's the right time to start training is because it's not who they are, it's what they're signing up for. And so it's really an identity issue more than it's a circumstantial issue. They're waiting for the right circumstances to be aligned for them to invest in themselves. But if they believed that it's really who they are, that they are a training organization that just happens to do blank, or they're a sales organization that just happens to do blank, then it's an identity thing. Well, if it's an identity thing, then of course they're going to train all the time. That's just what they're going to do. In that second question, you talked about the idea of a spring selling season. I think we have to be careful with our words. Again, we have to be really have a high consciousness about the kind of words that we're using and really be impeccable with our words, which comes from the book called The Four Agreements. What I mean is, it's not what you say, it's what people hear that really matters. And so if you're saying to your team, hey, we've got to make our numbers in the spring because that's the selling season, that's when people are buying. Okay, break that down. What in the world are people hearing? They're hearing that only people buy during a certain time of the month. Only people buy during a certain time of the month. That's a huge problem. So that means that we're telling our sales team right now that it's not about you. There's nothing you can specifically do to convince a person to choose you. We're telling them that it's all about the circumstances that you've been given. And so when people are buying, then we need to obviously sell them. When they're not buying in any season but the spring, then I guess we can't do anything about it. So of course, when we're in a non-spring selling season, then your salespeople are going to say, hey, it's not me. Remember earlier you told me that in the spring they're buying? Well, now this is the summer, the fall, or the winter. And so because of that, I need lower prices. I need better incentives. I need a different product because you said it's not me. Now, Mary, that's quite the opposite of a human that has what's called high self-efficacy. High self-efficacy is what psychologists believe, that people have such a belief in themselves that they believe they're capable of performing no matter the circumstances. So one of the things I've been telling my children since, they were probably 5 or 6 years old, is I tell them, kids, you are the problem, but you're also the solution. Think about that. You're the problem and you're the solution. Most of the time, parents only tell their kids that they're the solution. But I think that only gives really half of the story. I think they also need to know that they are also the problem based upon the choices they make. But at the same time, they can make different choices and, of course, become the solution. That creates a very different mindset. That creates more of an efficacious mindset, more of a growth mindset than a circumstantial mindset.
Well, I like it because it can empower you and it can set you free from feeling like you're a victim of what's happening around you. So I think that's very, very strong. So another thing that I hear often is, Mary, you know what? My people just don't have enough confidence. If they had more confidence, they could sell more, but they just don't have the confidence. So I'm interested, Jason, what is the fastest way to instill confidence into a sales professional?
Single fastest way to instill confidence is through your verbal belief in them. It's through your verbal validation in them. When you say to that salesperson, I 100% believe that you can do these behaviors with the next customer because of the following reasons that I see in you. And I would not have ever asked you to do something or ever will ask you something that I believe will cause you shame or I believe you are not capable of. And so I 100% believe you can do this. Do you trust me that I believe you can do this? Great, you do. And so right now, go do it. Go try it. See, what I'm doing right there, Mary, is I'm allowing them to borrow my belief in them. If they don't have belief in themselves, then they need to borrow my belief in them until they can create their own belief in themselves, which will only happen after they actually do the behavior. Once they do the behavior, then they'll have this new kind of anchored moment that says, gosh, I did that, so therefore I'm capable of doing that. Therefore, I can now do it again in the future. Now they won't need my belief going forward. One last thing, Mary, I believe that our beliefs have more to do with our success than our abilities. I mean, think about it this way. Right now, you have two salespeople that both go to the exact same seminar, come from the exact same college education, and they learn the exact same process pattern strategy, the exact same skills taught in the seminar. Now, both those salespeople immediately go out and they sell in the exact same circumstances to the exact same customers, have the exact same opportunity, but one salesperson outsells the other one 4-1. Mary, we've seen this all the time. And again, this is because our beliefs have more to do with our success than our abilities. We will always use our abilities to the point that we believe are possible, which is why it's so important to be a leader that expands their beliefs, that expands what they believe are possible when that salesperson doesn't have that belief in themselves.
Here's a question for you. What if Bill Walsh, the legendary coach of the 49ers, or Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seattle Seahawks, or, of course, Nick Saban, the coach of the Crimson Tide, ran your team? Chapter 5. I'm going to read words that describe managers and words that describe coaches, and I want you to consider which words would you like to describe your career by. Managers: constrain, dictate, domineer, regulate. Coaches: mentor, guide, inspire, prepare. Nick Saban leads the Alabama Crimson Tide football program by focusing on the process. He has a comprehensive, rigorous approach to focusing on the day-to-day play calling and letting the bigger issues take care of themselves. I often hear leaders say they're training their team, but in reality, they're only rehashing numbers and past deeds, not planning and calling plays for the future. Here's a real-world training failure. A salesperson for a large homebuilder described the company's in-house lender as a have-to for prospective buyers. Instead of framing the lender as a benefit, customers felt obligated to use them. Company leaders failed to implement a process to help sell in-house mortgages. Remember that being a leader means you're a sales professional. Your strategies, ideas, and beliefs need to be understood and agreed upon by your team to be implemented correctly. So to evolve from a manager to a coach, do the following 3 steps. Step 1, win employee buy-in. Clearly define the process, pattern, and strategy you want them to follow. And make sure they agree and are excited to put it to use. Step 2, set expectations early and often. Tell them exactly what you expect and revisit it often. Step 3, celebrate effort. Show appreciation for initiative as well as results. Remember, you are the one who calls the play. You're the head coach. See, if the team member executes, celebrate them, whether or not it ended with the results you wanted. So if this is something you can relate to, don't worry about it. Next time, make sure your team understands and embraces the what, the how, and the why of the plays you call.
Chapter 5, coaches versus managers. Jason, something that I like a lot from this chapter is set expectations early and often. And I know that you always tell people to start setting the expectations in the interview and to do takeaway closes in the interview and to tell them everything they're going to need to know about what their first 90 days is going to look like in the interview. Can you share some of that with us?
Yeah, I just think it's important to just be honest with the people you hire. And I know that sounds kind of silly. You're probably thinking, well, gosh, I am honest with people I hire. Well, majority of the time, I don't really think we are. I think we kind of sugarcoat what is going to happen when a person signs up for a job, specifically in sales. So, for example, I mean, this is what I would say. If that person's going to have to miss nights, weekends, and major holidays, if they're going to have to miss their kid's soccer game majority of the time, if it's going to prevent them from going to church, I think they need to know that at the interview. I think they need to know that in order to make the kind of money that they're capable of making, then they're going to have to do what others are unwilling to do. That a person can't just sign up for the job and work 9 to 5 and make that kind of money. If your company's gonna require them to train as often as we make FPG salespeople train, which again is up to 8 hours per week, then I think they need to know that. They need to know what you expect in them. If you're gonna have a coaching session with them at least once a week for 30 minutes to 60 minutes, which is what we recommend, then they need to know, I'm going to be coaching you on a weekly basis. Is this something that you're okay with? Are you okay with me holding you accountable? What concerns would you have with that? If you get some answers back that, well, I kind of like to be actually left alone, they're probably not the right person for you. It's all about deciding the kind of culture that you want to create, the kind of place that you want to create, and then it's just being really, really clear with people when you hire them what you're creating. For example, FPG, we've won Best Place to Work a couple years in a row in the city of Fort Worth, Texas. And one of the things I like to tell people all the time when we interview them is FPG is a best place to work for the people who like our best place to work culture. Not everyone likes our best place to work culture. For example, at FPG, I have 3 inspirations behind our culture. First is the military. I love the discipline of the military. I love the pride and respect and the loyalty of what it takes to be a soldier in the United States military. Number 2, I come from the fraternity world, the Greek world, and I love the brotherhood that I learned, and it created who I am in that fraternity system. I loved the rituals and the rite of passages that we had to have to go from pledge to active member of the fraternity. And number 3 is the church world, the positive intention of church, regardless if you're a religious person or not. Just think about the positive intention of church. People go there to feel big on Sunday or whatever day they go to church. They want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And so that's our inspiration behind our culture is the positive intention of the military, the positive intention of the Greek world, and the positive intention of the church world. And not everyone wants that. Not everyone wants to be a part of something like that. But we want our people to be a part of that. We want them to be a part of something that's bigger than them. And so that's the people that we attract. So a lot of people don't want to be a part of that because we tell them that in the interview, and they'll end up just walking out of the interview.
Jason, something I've heard you say over and over is about celebrating the process or celebrating the effort over the result, always measuring and coaching the process and not the result. And so what are some specific strategic things that you do for your team to feel celebrated, to feel appreciated, and to know that we're looking at process, not results?
It's a great question. And again, this came from a book that I read called The Score Takes Care of Itself by the legendary Bill Walsh of the 49ers. And just like the title says, the score takes care of itself. It's he believed if people every day committed to a certain set of standards, a certain process or strategy, then the score would take care of itself. And he proved it. He proved it in his legendary career at the 49ers. And the problem again, Mary, if we're an organization that focuses solely on the result, what we actually encourage legal cheating. Think about it this way. I'm about to push some barriers here, but the whole reason why the No Child Left Behind Act failed is because we told hard-working, ethical, awesome teachers that if you can make sure that all of your kids pass, you will get a Christmas bonus. And so what ended up happening is the teachers, coming up to the finish line, realized that they weren't able to get some of the kids to pass. And so they started teaching the test because it was more about the test scores than it was about actually learning. And so the reason why I think that's huge for us to think about is I believe all teachers start off really good. I think they start off really ethical and really moral and really honest. But the system actually forced them to be corrupt in that situation. They had to decide, do I buy something extra for my kids for Christmas, or do I focus on teaching the students how to learn correctly, even if it means I'm going to miss my Christmas bonus? And so just the same, I think the same thing happens in our organizations. If we focus solely on the result, we're going to create legal cheating, which means you're going to have salespeople that will say, you know what, it's not me. The reason why this person's not buying, it's the price. And so I need a lower price in order to make this happen. Or it's not me, it's the operations department, or it's the customer experience department. Those are the reasons why we're losing deals. And so they constantly blame other people and they don't take personal ownership over their success. So one of the things that we do at FPG to make sure that our employees are focused on the process pattern strategy and not just the result is we have this thing called I'm Freaking Awesome Happy Hour. And so every Friday, it's a meeting that we have at 4 p.m. It's a mandatory meeting, just like anything else. And it's where every employee goes around and they validate another employee, or they witnessed them focusing on the process pattern strategy that led them to a positive effect. At the same time, they create an affirmation on themselves. And so they'll say, in pursuit of my primary question of, I did blank that caused blank and the effect was blank. See, I believe, Mary, that the most important thing to teach your employees, to teach really the human race, is cause and effect thinking. People need to recognize that when they do certain things, it causes them to get certain things, and the effect is something that they either want or don't want. And so if they want to change the effect, they got to change the cause. If they want to change the cause, they got to change what they do. And once a person realizes that, it really will change their life. Again, every human being needs to recognize they're the problem and they also are the solution.
All right, here's a question for you. Why is it that the level of someone's education does not directly correlate to how successful they will be in sales? Chapter 6. You are enough. One of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Brene Brown when she says, when you say you are enough, you start listening and stop screaming. Just think about that for a second. The reason why people complain in the form of alibis and excuses is because they don't believe they're enough. The reason why people reject new ideas, new books, new podcasts, they reject coaching is, again, because they don't believe they're enough. Carol Dweck, a Stanford professor and the author of the book Mindset, found out that we're programmed to have either a fixed or a growth mindset based on what our culture, parents, teachers, books, and managers all tell us. Here's a real-world training failure. Years ago, as a sales manager, I inherited a sales team. I looked through the resumes, and I had 2 sales professionals, Brandon and Lily, who were brand new and had almost no sales experience. Brandon had a 4-year degree and made $60,000 a year at his previous 9-to-5 job. Lily, meanwhile, didn't have a 4-year degree and left a job that paid her nearly half of Brandon's salary. I believe Brandon, who had more education and was accustomed to making more money, would outsell Lily. But here's the thing. I quickly noticed Lily always asked for my guidance and was open to my coaching. Brandon, on the other hand, avoided or argued with my coaching. Lily consistently made more sales and eventually moved up in the company. Brandon was eventually asked to seek employment elsewhere. See, it wasn't the skill set they came in with that was important, but rather how open they were to learning and growing. Today, as a trainer, I take responsibility for Brandon's fate. Training that's focused only on telling people what to do ultimately ignores the more important task of personal guidance and reprogramming employees from fixed to growth mindsets. Great training should help everyone grow. So here's a tip. When interviewing a sales trainer to bring into your company, ask how they'll handle a sales professional who doesn't want to be a part of the training. If their answer is either they need to get on board or they're fired, this is a trainer who is ill-equipped to coach and grow your entire team. Here are 3 steps to adopting a growth mindset. Step 1, know your programming and the programming of your team. Know and understand your beliefs based on your history. Acknowledge the programming of each individual on your team so that you can show them areas of growth. Step 2, learn and grow. It starts, you guessed it, with you. Are you constantly learning, growing, and demonstrating a growth mindset for your team? If you're not, start today. Step 3, be grateful. Affirm yourself and celebrate the progress. Acknowledge and celebrate when those on your team choose a growth mindset and are open to your training. So if this is something you can relate to, don't worry. Next time, coach each member of your team to choose a growth mindset along with the new behaviors you want them to have.
Jason, in this chapter, you talk about Brandon and Lily, 2 sales professionals who worked for you. And you're talking about the difference in their education on their success. However, I really think that this also lines up with a very heated debate within sales hiring, which is, do you hire somebody that's green, that's brand new, and you train them in your way, or do you hire a veteran from somewhere else and try to tweak the process? And I know there's a lot of people out there, I've answered these calls before that say, I know what Jason Forrest thinks. He thinks you only hire green. So this is your chance. What are Jason Forrest's real beliefs on how to hire?
The person that I believe is your top prospect when it comes to recruiting is the veteran that has the most experience selling what you're selling, but is also leash free. See, I don't think it's a either or. I think it's an and. I want the veteran that's got the most experience and is leash free. I mean, think about it this way. If you hire a brand new person with no experience, then they got to learn a lot of stuff. They might not have any bad habits when it comes to leashes, but they also don't know your product knowledge. They don't have the selling skills down. They don't have the knowledge on selling the deal or selling your company, your brand. So they have a lot to learn, even though they might be leash free. At the same time, they're also kind of unproven. They could be a false positive. What does that mean? You know, I didn't realize that I was scared, Mary, of jumping out of planes until I actually jumped out of an airplane. I thought jumping out of airplanes would be fine. I have no problem with it. And then I jumped out of an airplane, and then I developed a leash from jumping out of airplanes. So if you were to give me some sort of test on my fear of jumping out of airplanes before I did it, I would have had no leashes. So again, the best person you want to hire is the one that's actually been in the cage fight, that's actually been in the trenches, that's actually sold what you're selling and doesn't have any leashes. So you want the person who's jumped out of hundreds of airplanes and has no problem jumping again. That's the person you want.
Perfect. I agree with you 100%. And I'm interested though. So I'm interviewing somebody, they're a veteran. What do I ask and how do I know if they have leashes?
I would ask situational questions about the techniques that you're wanting them to use. So for example, you could ask the question of so in which situations would you not ask the customer what's holding you back from buying what you're selling? And then you just kind of wait. And anytime they give you a criteria of when they're going to ask it versus if they say, I would ask it to every single customer, why would I not? Well, that's a leash-free veteran. But if they give you criteria of it depends on the situation or depends on how long I've spent time with them or it depends if I've earned the right to ask them to buy. Those are all examples of leashes. Another great question to ask is, what do you think of salespeople in general? You know, if they say that salespeople are the lifeblood of America, and nothing happens until someone sells something, then they have above the line beliefs about selling. They believe that selling is very noble. Quite the opposite if they say that selling is a used car or selling's really just to facilitate or to help a person make decisions. It's very passive in their language or maybe below the line in their language. Then they've got what we call role rejection. In their life, selling is more of a plan B than it's a plan A. And so that's very important for me to find out whenever I'm interviewing something is, again, what are their leashes? What are their beliefs about selling? You know, Mary, there's many, many more questions that we ask. And if you contact us, we can actually give you our hiring guide, which is probably about 100 or more different types of questions that we use to interview. And we've vetted these. These are questions we found that work on hiring the top salespeople out there and really separating the best from the average.
So Jason, how does somebody contact you if they would like that hiring guide?
The fastest way is just email us at sales@fpg.com, SALES@fpg.com, and immediately our sales team will get you what you need.
So, Jason, here's another very heated topic that salespeople have. Are sales professionals born or are they made?
That's a great question. And here's the way I will answer that. I believe all human beings are born to sell. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. I believe that the skill of selling is a life skill like breathing or the ability to go find food for survival. Think about it this way. And right now, anytime an executive or someone comes to me and says, Jason, that's not true. Let me tell you about my 35-year-old daughter, Maria. She is extremely introverted and there's no way she could ever be successful in sales. Well, then I look at him and I say, great, but tell me about Maria when she was 7. Tell me about when she was a kid. How many times did she challenge you when you said, Maria, you can't have one more piece of candy? Or Maria, no, you can't stay up later and watch that TV show. How many times did she overcome that and convince you, her father, to stay up late or to eat that piece of candy? I promise you, Maria was born to sell. It was just through our society, through parenting, through culture norms, where we told her that she couldn't do that or it's not possible to do that. I mean, think about how often we tell kids, no, you can't have that. And then after, 1,000 no's in their life, they're anchored to believe that word no is something of dread and of terror. And so they run away from that. Of course, they're not going to sign up for a career like sales that all they're going to hear is no's the majority of the time. Again, remember in sales, we fail more times than we win. And so I believe, again, all human beings are born to sell. We're just told that we're not supposed to do it.
Here's a question for you. If you want to be rich, do you take advice from poor people or from rich people? Chapter 7, Success is following a process, pattern, or strategy. Wealthy people have a habit of learning from other wealthy people. Warren Castle Jr. is a 15-year-old entrepreneur and published author. He achieved success in such a short time by studying the wealthiest people who ever lived and executing what they did. If Warren wanted to be poor, he could find poor people and follow their process, pattern, or strategy. But he wanted to be rich. Are the internal and external trainers in your company following what the best do or what the average do? Are they people who've achieved high levels of success even when the market and circumstances were against them? Here's a real-world training failure. A vice president of sales called me and said she was recently looking at different training options for her sales team. After speaking with her for a bit, I discovered that a few years ago, her company hired a sales trainer, and after a year of training, she's seen no real change within her team. The trainer they hired had been a sales professional who won several awards, but she never sold in her current team's tough Midwest market. The trainer couldn't relate to the down market or overcome the objections the sales professionals received. The trainer hadn't been forced to follow the processes of the truly great sales professionals in that down market, so she didn't. Here are the 4 steps for training success. Step 1, find the most successful person in your field. Step 2, commit to mimicking their process, pattern, and strategy. Step 3, get comfortable with being uncomfortable to achieve a desired outcome for success. This is the secret to success. Step 4, find a coach to hold you accountable to following that process, pattern, and strategy. So if this is something you can relate to, don't worry. Next time, achieve your desired outcome by following a process, pattern, and strategy that has shown a track record of success.
Chapter 7, Success is following a process, pattern, or strategy. Jason, something that's so interesting to me that within the culture of sales teams, a lot of times there become norms or socially acceptable ways to sell or a socially acceptable process, pattern, or strategy that's not actually helping them to achieve their goals. So for instance, whatever the norm, whatever most people are doing, we all then gravitate towards and keep doing, even if there's an outlier of somebody who's very successful, who's doing things differently. Can you talk about that?
Yes, Mary. I mean, the reason for that is because people have, what Richard Bandler would call is a familiarity zone. It's we get very familiar with something, and we'll do whatever we can to kind of stay within that familiar zone, even if it's not working for them. Just think about how many people are consistently achieving something they don't want to achieve. Think about that for a second. Think about how often people are in a bad relationship, a relationship that's not serving them very well. Well, it's very familiar for them, and so they will do whatever they can to kind of make that work for them. That's really in their comfort zone. It's familiar for them, and so anything outside of that, it just becomes kind of too big for them. It becomes too daunting of a task to really make that change. And so I would actually say that they're very successful at being poor, or they're very successful at being in a bad relationship. Think about a person who's in and out of prison. They're very successful at getting in prison, getting out of prison, and getting back in prison. They know exactly the process, pattern, and strategy to do exactly that. So if you're someone who wants to go to prison, then what you'd want to do is you'd want to go seek out that person. You'd want to go to the warden and say, hey, who's the person that no matter what, they keep coming back to prison, and you want to take them out for $100 steak dinner, and you would say, hey, can you teach me how to get back into prison? Because you're the most successful person at it. See, I believe all human beings are hardwired for achieving success in their life, but it's based upon their perception of that. It's based upon their paradigm of what success is for them. So what does that mean? It means that we as leadership, we as humans need to go find those people and expand their view of possibilities. We need to help them recognize that right now they're focused on going in the wrong direction. So if they want to change their life, they need to change their focus. So for example, let's say someone is really successful at making kind of 9-to-5 money as a salesperson, but they want to make worth it money, which is worth the sacrifices of not making 9-to-5. So what are they going to do? They have two options. They go find other 9-to-5 salespeople that are making 9-to-5 money, and they say, hey, tell me your process, pattern, and strategy. And then immediately you figure out, oh, well, these are the things you're doing to consistently make 9-to-5 money. I'm not going to do that. That's the first thing they want to do. And the second thing they want to do is go find the salespeople that are making that worth it money and say, hey, tell me, what's the process, pattern, and strategy that you're doing? What are you doing that the other 9-to-5 salespeople are unwilling to do? And I'm going to copy you. I'm going to surrender my current belief system, and I'm going to follow you. I'm going to mimic your process, pattern, and strategy, because that's going to lead me to your worth it money level of success versus the other salespeople's 9-to-5 level of success. I can't say it enough. Both people are equally successful at following their process, pattern, strategy to get to their desired outcome. The question is for you, Mary, is which outcome do you desire? Which outcome do the people listening to this right now desire? And then they need to find those people and follow their process, pattern, strategy.
I heard once a saying about you want to be the dumbest, least successful person in the room. And I think this falls right in alignment with that, because now you can see the new ways and the better ways. Because now you can see the new and better ways to do something. So I absolutely love that. I think it's interesting too, is that you also have to, it seems, put your success of what you really want, not the loser success, but the real success of what you want over what other people are going to say about you. Because if you're the one that's aligning with an outlier, that's doing the things that other people aren't going to do, they're going to talk about that, right? I mean, now you've got to just have enough belief in yourself that that's okay, that you're willing to do that for your own success.
Absolutely. I mean, just think of it this way. Are the majority of the people rich? Are the majority of the people poor? Are the majority of the people in the President's Club or in the top achiever or the high achiever club of the sales team, or are the minority of them? Well, of course, the minority of the salespeople are crushing it. The minority of the ones are making that worth it money. And so it's lonely because you're with the minority. It's much more familiar, and it's much more within our comfort zone to go hang out with the general population, because I got more friends to supply my encouragement from. I got more people to say, yeah, keep doing it this 9-to-5 way. Keep being just like us. Because if we can keep saying that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and then we can band together and we can convince leadership that we need better prices or better product. And we can say, you know what, I'm doing everything I can. It's not me, it's the circumstance, it's the situation. And so, but the minority, the top producers, they don't say that. They believe, again, they're the problem and they're the solution.
Jason, there's two trains of thought that I've heard from different companies when they're hiring outside training providers. And one is, you know what? I want to hear from everyone. And so every quarter, I'm going to bring in a different trainer and get the experience and the ideas from them. Now, there's another train of thought that says, no, I want one trainer and I'm going to keep them for the entire year and we're going to be consistent with them. So what are the pros and cons of each train of thought?
I'll answer it this way. I love this quote by Bruce Lee that says, would you fear the man who's learned 1,000 kicks that he's only tried once? Or the man who's learned one kick that he's tried 1,000 times? Of course, you'd fear the man who's learned one kick that he's tried 1,000 times. And I think this is so true when it comes to training. I actually think that if a team can really choose one training provider and be consistent with it, make it a part of their DNA. Again, this is not something that we do. It's not the flavor of the month. It's who we are. And we're going to create banners around it. We're going to create tchotchkes around it. We are going to create rewards and recognitions around it. Our clients have a thing called the Warrior Award, and they have warrior stories, and they have X Factor trophies, all things that we teach, but it's all part of their culture. It's all part of their DNA. And so because of that, everyone is inch wide, mile deep focused on the specific prospector strategy and things that they're learning. So of course they're going to have, more long-lasting, sustainable success than going to the buffet way of learning.
Jason, the second step of the 4 steps for training success is commit to mimicking their process, pattern, or strategy. You're talking about the most successful person in their field. But some pushback that I hear is, but I want to do it my way. I want to be authentically me. I don't want to copy somebody else. I don't want to be the Jason Forrest salesperson. I want to be my own salesperson and do it my way. How do you respond to that?
Look, I'm going to be pretty brutal right now. And the first thing I'm going to say is, I get that. But the question is, do you want to make worth it money, or do you want to make 9 to 5 money? And you signed up for this job to make worth it money. This commission-based sales is the worst paying 9 to 5 job on the planet because it's not 9 to 5. And so right now, if your way of doing it is going to cause you to make only 9 to 5 money, that I would just change. I think don't be stubborn about it. At the same time, if you don't like that answer, I would also kind of question that whole concept of it's my authentic self. I think a lot of times we use that as almost a mask. Think about if you want to really go with the idea of your authentic self, go back to when you were born. When you were born, that was your most authentic self. When you were 1, you were 2, you were 3, you were 4, you were 5, you were 6, that was more authentic than you are now at the age of 40. And so again, what would the 4-year-old version of you do? Well, the 4-year-old version would just say anything. The 4-year-old version would mimic, what is right. The 8-year-old version would be unleashed. If I tell my kids to go up to this complete stranger and ask them certain questions or do certain things, they'll do it. Why? Because they haven't been made fun of yet. They don't have any self-identity or belief issues that say that they can't do that or shouldn't do that. I'd really question that idea of your authentic self. Is that really the mask that you want to hide behind? I also like the research by Amy Cuddy, who talks about great TED Talk. Encourage everyone to go out there and search Amy Cuddy's TED Talks, and where she talks about that your body language really shapes who you are. And she has this amazing line in the video where she says, fake it until you become it, which is a great line, right? Fake it until you become it. Meaning that if you have a certain person or a certain being that you want to become, well, go mimic them, go play copycat and learn it, how they do it, copy what they do, and you'll start to kind of change your belief systems about it. You'll change your behavior. That happens. Even just being around, you, Mary, you and I start kind of saying the same things. We kind of copycat each other with our speech patterns because we're just kind of around each other all the time. Well, someone could say, Jason, you're not your authentic self anymore because you sound, more like Mary, or Mary sounds more like you, so you're not authentic anymore. Well, I actually think that is your authentic self. It's the best version of you. It's a better version of myself than it was before. I'm constantly learning and growing. I'm constantly growing. I'm constantly getting better. And so what they're really saying is that they prefer the older version of you. But that older version, might not be the best version of you. And so again, be careful that we don't hide behind the cliche of, I don't feel like that's my authentic self, and so I choose to make 9 to 5 money.
I like that. And I think it's a much better strategy than the one I've been using, which has been to point out that, their eyelashes or hair color or height might not be their authentic self. So this is much better. I like this training.
Here's a question for you. If you want your children to be the best in sports, do you just sign the check or do you get involved? Chapter 8. Based on all the research, students with involved parents, number 1, earn higher grades, number 2, attend school regularly, and number 3, have better social skills. How far can a child make it in athletics without parent involvement? Only a few kids will ever make a varsity team without a parent in the mix. You'll never see a child make it to the Olympics without a parental figure taking an active role in their training. The same is true of our employees. Gallup states that 70% of employee engagement is due to the manager effect. An employee's perception of their company's culture is directly connected to how engaged their direct manager is in their training. Here's a real-world training failure. Years ago, I had a client whose vice president of operations admitted he didn't know much about sales, nor was interested in learning. This was a problem because the sales department reported to this VP. The company relied on FPG to train their team for 1 hour a week. However, there was no further accountability or coaching inside the company, which resulted in a culture that said, coaching isn't for me. So, if you're a leader that wants to create a culture where people say, coaching is for me, here are the 4 qualities that you must adopt to make this happen. Number 1, you want to help employees feel supported, equipped, empowered, and cared for by celebrating effort and providing feedback. Number 2, you want to model the behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs of the company in regards to training. Number 3, you want to pair up unengaged employees with the most hardworking and loyal leaders. And number 4, you want to ask for employee feedback and be vulnerable about your mistakes. So if this is something you can relate to, don't worry. Next time, inspire your team to pursue mastery by engaging them with the right balance of encouragement and accountability.
Chapter 8, students with involved parents. Jason, something I hear a lot from the VP of sales or just anyone in sales leadership is, hey, you know what? I like to hire the best people and then leave them alone so I don't mess them up. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's crazy. That'd be like saying, I'm going to go hire someone with Jordan Spieth's a golf ability, and then I'm going to just leave him alone. The reason why Jordan Spieth is an amazing professional golfer is because of his relentless devotion to coaching and all the coaches that he's had in his life that have pushed him to become a better golfer. So just the same, I believe that you want to hire the best possible people, and then you want to coach them to be even better.
And what if someone on your sales team, a lot of times we have veterans on the sales team and maybe a younger sales manager, and they're told, hey, you're micromanaging me. How does that sales manager respond to that?
What I would do, Mary, is I'd be very downstream with the situation. And I would say, look, I'm not trying to micromanage you. Micromanaging you means that I'm making you feel small, means that I don't believe you're enough. It means that I have to tell you exactly what to do in every situation. That's not why I hired you. I believe that you are 100% enough, that you are absolutely a capable sales warrior. But at the same time, every great sales warrior needs a coach. And so what I'm here to do is I'm here to show you some specific things, to bounce some ideas off you, to collaborate with you on how you can convert more, on how you can sell more. And that's my goal. And so after this coaching session, if you try the things that I ask you to try and it doesn't work for you, it doesn't increase your conversion rate, it doesn't make you more money, then I'll stop doing it. But that's the level of accountability I want. I want to help you call the plays. I want to help you make more money, and I want you to run those plays. And I believe together, you will be even a better version of you.
Jason, let's talk about organizational structures. Sometimes there are small businesses where the sales team reports to the VP of operations, like what you talk about here in chapter 8. There's other times where there's a VP of sales and marketing with that VP not having sales background that the team is now reporting to. What can those leaders of sales teams that maybe didn't come up through sales, what do they need to know? How can they still hold them accountable and still be successful leading a sales team?
The simple answer I have is that they need to know the playbook better than the players. Think about it this way. If Bill Belichick is considered the greatest coach in NFL history, and he can't throw the football better than Tom Brady, but he knows the playbook better than Tom Brady. So he's able to be a coach to add value to the quarterback of Tom Brady because he knows what plays Tom Brady should be running and how Tom Brady should be running those plays. And so the simple answer I would give you is that sales manager needs to be relentless on studying the playbook. They have to know the playbook better than not just the general population salespeople, but the top 1%. Because if you can earn respect by teaching the top 1% something new, then you will get the other 99% respect too.
All right, here's a question for you. Why do so many lottery winners go broke? Chapter 9, who plays the lottery? Have you ever thought about that? You ever thought about who are the actual people that play the lottery? A recent study showed households with annual incomes under $13,000 spend an average of 9% of their income on lottery tickets. And 70% of all lottery winners go bankrupt. So why do low-income households spend so much money on lottery tickets and then lose it all when they win? Here's the answer. Their external circumstances don't match their internal story of who they are. When a person has told themselves repeatedly they're worth $13,000 a year, and suddenly they're millionaires, their minds don't match their bank accounts. So they sabotage their wealth to return to their comfort zone, which is about $13,000 a year. To truly grow in wealth, it's more effective to change your mindset on what you're worth first, and then allow your external realities to change. Here's a real-world training failure. A sales professional started her career and barely met her quota. After noticing a positive change, an FPG trainer asked about it. The sales professional said she'd started only spending time with top achievers. Her previous associates contributed to a continuous negative internal story. She spent more time with associates whose internal story and external circumstances matched what she desired. And, you guessed it, her career advanced. Here are 2 steps to shift your internal picture of worthiness. Step 1, acknowledge your current story. We have to first know where we are in order to know how to get where we want to go. Step 2, fake it until you become it. Know what your new self is going to be and what kind of responsibility that will entail. So if this is something you can relate to, don't worry about it. Next time, remember that each of your sales professionals has a number that they believe they are worth. In order for them to sell more and thus earn more, they must first believe they're worth more.
Chapter 9, who plays the lottery? Jason, this is so interesting to me because so many people go into sales and their previous job was paying them $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. And all of a sudden, overnight, they are capable and a lot of times achieving 6-figure incomes. And that's a lot to handle psychologically on their self-worth. What can leaders do to help start expanding that internal picture of their team before the person makes that kind of money so they don't have this lottery effect of botching sales and sabotaging themselves to go back to what they are comfortable making?
That's a great question. And I do see that all the time, is that if you look at all salespeople, they're really on a given plateau at any given time. I mean, you can, a salesperson, who's currently making, $50,000 a year is on a plateau. A person who's making currently $80,000 on a plateau, $300,000 really on a plateau. So I would say one of the things they can start doing is start just asking them their own kind of self-worth questions. Do you believe that you're worth making blank? Whatever that number is that's outside of their comfort zone. And then you would tell them, if they say, well, I'm not really sure, or I'd ask them this question: how much did you personally cause that number to happen? And if they say, well, it had a lot to do with the situation or the circumstance or what was going on, well, then you start to notice a self-worth type of situation. And so then you'd want to make sure they understand there's a cause and effect to everything, and you'd want to help them kind of break down specifically what they did that caused them to make that kind of number. And more they can kind of recognize that connection, that cause and effect connection to what they're capable of, combined with you reinforcing that belief in them, then the more you can actually break what I would call the expectation trap. So the expectation trap is we have an expectation, a salesperson expectation of what they're capable of making in a given circumstance. At the same time, leadership has a expectation of what they think that salesperson can make in a given circumstance, and both individual people reinforce each other. So a salesperson starts and says, you know what, I have an expectation that I can make $100,000 in this situation. The sales manager has an expectation that they can make $100,000 in that situation. So both, again, reinforce each other. So what we need to do is we need to break free of that expectation trap by constantly pushing our belief in that person. Here's why I believe this salesperson can earn more than that. Here's why I think they're worthy of that. Here's specifically the behaviors and processes and strategies that when they adopt those things, they will earn more. So again, make it more about the process, pattern, and strategy versus just blind luck, and all that will change for them.
Jason, something else I hear often with people that are bought in, they believe they want to train their team, they know that training is important, and the only thing that's going to get them to the next level of success is to have a well-trained team, is trying to decide whether they currently have a team that's worth training in. And so sometimes they're in transition, sometimes they're in growth, sometimes they just know that there's a few people they're not real sure are going to make it. And so they're trying to decide when's the right time to start training. How do you know that you have a team that's ready to start a training program?
My simple answer is right now. I feel like training serves as a window and a mirror. It's a window into the future sales warrior that you want to create. At the same time, it's a mirror into who your people are right now and what they're doing or not doing that's consistent or inconsistent with the vision of what you want them to do. And so I actually find that training actually serves as a great catalyst on really evaluating your staff. For example, so I've seen clients of ours that have said there's no way that person's going to make it in the training, and the training completely unleashes them. Just the same, I've seen clients where they say that these people over here or these salespeople are going to do great with the training, and they quit. They don't believe in themselves enough, and we can't unleash them fast enough, and they kind of give up on themselves. And so, again, the best answer I would say is just jump into the training as fast as possible. It'll actually be a great way to very quickly decide, who on your team is going to step up, and the ones who don't step up, you can easily coach them out.
All right, here's a question for you. Why are there no books written on how to run your company like the U.S. government? Chapter 10, Carrot and Stick Motivation. The government creates rules and then doles out punishment to correct wrong behavior, but how effective is it? Going back to why people still buy roadies and drive with them, social pressure causes people to change behavior, not the government. For example, the National Bureau of Economic Research suggests tobacco taxes have little influence on reducing smoking. It would take 100% tax increase to decrease smoking by only 5%. Only when society decided smoking was uncool did the culture change. The shift began when Hollywood portrayed cigarettes negatively in television and blockbuster films and cut back on smoking advertisements. Here's a real-world training failure. I attended a multi-industry conference a few years back and met a retail sales manager who was venting his frustrations that his sales professionals weren't showing up on time. To encourage his employees to clock in earlier, he began docking pay by a percentage point each day they arrived late by 5 minutes or more. By using the carrot and stick motivational tool, this sales manager will have as much success as the government. If he's looking to change his employees' behavior, the culture shift will have to come from a deeper place. So, here are 4 steps to change company culture. Step 1, identify what behaviors you want from your employees and praise them frequently. Step 2, in training sessions, have employees explain how the policy benefits them. Step 3, make sure leaders participate in modeling the right behaviors. Step 4, make it socially acceptable to uphold the standard and socially unacceptable to be disengaged. If this is something you relate to, don't worry about it. Next time, create a culture that unleashes greatness by making social pressures align with cultural values.
Chapter 10, Carrot and Stick Motivation. Jason, the beginning of this chapter has my favorite line in the entire book, which says, "Why are there no books written on how to run your company like the U.S. government?" And then there's a picture that says policy, guidelines, practices, standards, rules, regulations, compliance. Now, I know you believe in a lot of those things. You believe in policies and guidelines and standards, but sometimes we can use them in the incorrect way. How do we know whether we are using our standards in a positive way that's going to push our team forward to be more profitable, or we're using our standards, our processes, our policies in a way that's actually restricting the performance of our employees?
I think one way to measure this is, do you see a profitable sales increase? At the same time, do you see your turnover decrease? If the standards are correct, then you're going to see more people doing the right things that are getting to the right results, versus if it's more of a negative thing, then you'll see quite the opposite.
Jason, you just brought up turnover as being an indicator of the culture that a certain leader is providing. So if there's a lot of turnover in the department, there's probably a weakness within the leader. What are some other indicators of weakness or strength within the culture of a department?
There's a few things that I really look for. I mean, one, I look for how often do the sales professionals reach out to their leader on ways that they can be better versus asking for things to be easier. So for example, if the sales rep's calling them and saying, "Hey, I can get this deal across if you lower the price, or if you give me this new incentive, or if you change the product or change this feature, then I could get the deal done for you." Or are they calling saying, "You know what, I'm not asking for you to lower the price, coach. I'm asking for you to coach me on how to sell through this without changing the circumstance, without lowering the price." I mean, that's a huge sign. That's a big sign that that salesperson has a high level of respect that their leader can make them better versus be really just a manager that's all about making circumstances easier.
All right, Jason, as we come to a close on WTF, final question of today. Jason, what do you hope that people have taken away from reading and listening to this book?
I would say what I hope they get is that if people really want better results in their life, better results for their employees, better results for their company, then training is absolutely a strategy they can use. That right now, they are currently achieving the process, pattern, strategy that they're living by in their organization. And so if they want to get a different outcome, they just need to change their process, pattern, strategy, making that happen. And training absolutely can do that. Training also has a presupposition that says that people are enough, that people are capable of learning more. And so when you train your people, think about this for a second. When you train your people, you're saying, "I believe you matter." And so often when I ask organizations, so have you invested in training in the past? They said, no, we've just never really invested in training. Well, be careful if you're an organization that it doesn't invest in training, because you're saying, "I don't believe that you matter. I believe it's the circumstances. I believe it's luck. I believe it's the situation that can get us to where we need to go. It's the economy. It's the government. It's not you, the individual human capital." And so to me, one of the greatest messages you can give your people is that I believe you're worth it. I believe that you are enough. And training does exactly that. It sends that exact message.